Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got an awesome video for you and we're going to look at music in the style of Franky Rizardo. Franky's a Dutch artist that rose to fame in the last few years with house and tech house, kind of really groovy, fun type of music. He's released on labels like Defected, Rejected, Saved, 8-Bit and a whole bunch more. His style can be kind of diverse, ranging from stuff that's quite deep and moody through to like really fun house kind of stuff. But it's all tied together with a signature sound of tight minimal drums, jacking open hats, and a keen ear for sampling. Franky Rizardo is quite a prolific sampler, and it's this keen ear for sample selection that's given rise to some of his biggest tracks. He's sampled a diverse range of artists from the likes of Brandy to Liberty City, aka Merc, to the classic icons of house, Mood to Swing. So today we're going to bust open Ableton and have a look at how you can build a track in the style of Franky Rizardo. As always, the project files for what I've done are available to download. There's a link in the description if you want to go and grab those from Patreon. Patreon's an amazing platform to help support creators, and it's the best way that you can help support the channel and ensure that I keep bringing you these videos on a regular basis. Anyway, enough of that, let's make some house music. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton and I've got a little project that I've put together in the style of Franky Rizardo. Now as I said at the start, Franky Rizardo has like a kind of signature sound, but he does slightly different styles. So what I've focused on is a bit more of the kind of groovy, housey style, but he also does things that are a bit more deep or things that are a bit more techy. So keep in mind that this is something that's a bit more housey. And I went for this style as it's something that I haven't really done on the channel yet. So with that in mind, let's have a listen. So one thing that I did find a bit challenging about putting this together was that a lot of Franky Rizardo's tracks are quite heavily sample based. So getting it right is kind of dependent on the samples that you've got at your disposal. So with that in mind, I've tried to put into practice a bunch of the techniques and things that he uses, which I would say is a combination of some kind of minimal house type drums with a kind of jacking backbeat and some more traditional house elements. Let's dive in and have a look. So we'll start at the top with the kicks. Kind of like a thumpy kick here, which I have sampled. And then that's coupled with a top kick, which is kind of like the top of a kick drum and a hat sound. So together they sound like this. And I'm not really doing anything to this because it was sampled, it's already been compressed and that kind of thing, and I'm just rolling off a little bit of the very low sub. This is just something that I do with my really low frequency stuff like kicks and basses. I generally roll them off from around 25 Hertz, as that's just not really useful information. So then we've got a couple of claps, a kind of natural hand clap style thing, and a more analog drum machine style clap, and they're being sent through a bit of reverb. And you can see the Dilby clap plate. This is the reverb that I use on pretty much every track. So together, so individually those sounds are a bit thin, but they complement each other really well and create this kind of nice, wide, full-bodied clap sound. So with the kick, then hats, we've got this quite strong, quite in-your-face open hat, which has got like the jacking house influence that I was talking about earlier. So let's have a listen to those all together. Oh yeah, it's also worth mentioning this is at 127 BPM, so it's got a bit of pace. This seemed to be like a pretty average tempo for Franky Rizardo's tracks. So then we've got a closed hat. So that's just a really short, clicky hat, and what I've got here is in the control section of the simpler, I've got it random pan 22%. And then I've also got it sending a little bit of signal to a ping pong delay, and that's dotted eighth notes. So that's really subtle, but it's just adding a bit more width and a little bit more swing. So it just kind of sounds a bit more interesting, a bit more textural with it. Then I've got this second open hat, which is just playing some groove hits. Now the swing settings, I've got MPC 16 swing, and this is at 63, which is a lot higher than I normally use. I normally use MPC 55, but I dragged in a couple of Franky's tracks and lined them up basically with the grid to see where the swing was at, and this seemed to be about right. So if I press this commit button, you're going to see in the MIDI what the swing is actually doing. So you can see it's dragging these offbeat notes forward. So that's what's being applied to the MIDI. So if I change this to none, and then with the swing, so it's quite strong swing. So the open hat groove has also got the same swing applied. So with that groove open hat, I wanted a sample that was similar but a bit different, and I've made it quite short with the envelopes here. So let's listen to the hats, claps, and kick. Now there's also an on-beat ride, which was something that I noticed Franky did in quite a few of his tracks. So that just really helps to pick up the pace after the drop, add a lot more energy to the groove. So let's have a look at this percussion group. First up, I've just got this little kind of tom drum fill. So that's just adding a bit of skip. I've also got the same swing applied. And that just kind of, it works in the same way that like a snare fill or something would at the end of a bar. Then I've got this thing I've called glitch percussion, which is just a sample, I think, from a loop that I found. And I've got a bit of echo applied to that. It's a ping pong with a quarter note. So it's going across the panorama. It just helps to extend that sound out and make it more of a texture. Then I've got this texture percussion, which is just a sample from a percussion loop from my sample pack. So it kind of sounds like a glitchy shaker kind of loop, but it's actually a full percussion loop. And I'm using Tantra, as always, to give it that kind of glitchy rhythm. So it's a drum preset called Pumper, and that sounds like this. So I'm actually in the process of working on a new sample pack, which is going to be all these kind of like glitchy textures like this. I noticed that it's kind of hard to find these type of things, and you tend to need quite specific plugins to make them. So I'm going to work on a sample pack that will have like percussive versions, like vocal texture versions, some kind of melodic texture versions. Yeah, it should be pretty cool. And of course I'll let you know on all my socials and everything when that's available. So let's have a listen to all the drums together. Now there is one more drum element, which is this drum break. So that's just a sample that I've found from a sample pack of drum breaks, and I've cut out the low end and added some overdrive. And this is being used as a fill at the end of the bar. This was something that I noticed Franky Rizardo did in a couple of the tracks that I was listening to. It helps to give it this kind of really organic, sampled, kind of classic house vibe. While I'm looking at the effects group, I may as well talk about these crashes. So instead of having a crash at the start of the phrase, I've got this like crash fill. So that works really well with that drum break as well. And then I've just got a snare roll which is happening in the break. So I've got that being sent to a big reverb, and it's got a low cut on it. So it starts really top endy. And then the lower frequencies are being revealed as it goes through to create intensity, and the volume's also coming up. Alright, so let's have a look at the bass. So here's the MIDI of that. So we're playing in B minor, and the pattern is kind of going down the scale, which gives it this kind of funky rolling feel as it picks up again at the end of the next bar. I've just got this last note up an octave on the second bar just to help create a little bit of differentiation. So let's have a look at the synthesis on this. I'm using Wavetable. What I'm actually doing here is I'm just using the sub. Now with this, I'll turn off the filter because I'm using the filter to add some drive and resonance. So it's adding quite a bit of character. I'll turn that off. So that adds quite a bit of body when I turn it back on. But the other thing that I'm doing is using this tone knob. So without that, it's going to sound really flat. It's just going to be a basic sine wave. So unless you're using studio monitors or you've got good headphones on, you're not going to hear that. You won't hear that on a laptop, I assume. With the filter, so it adds a little bit more drive, but this tone is what's really shaping that sound and giving it the extra harmonics. So it's a pretty neutral amp envelope with a short release. Then I've just got a tiny bit of envelope 2, which is modulating the cutoff. So you can see the cutoff just moving slightly there on every note. When I was actually doing the sound design, I did have a saw wave here on oscillator 1, which gives it this kind of like organ bass kind of feel. So it's a cool sound, so you could use it like that if you grab the project file from Patreon, but I didn't feel that it was quite right for this track. It gave it a bit too much of a cheesy vibe. Okay, then I've got this EQ, which is cutting off some of the higher harmonics. And then I've just got a little notch here, which is boosting some of the low mid harmonics. So it's quite subtle. My standard LFO tool, just doing some side chaining, and then I've got my standard low cut, which is being automated here in the break. This is being sent to a little bit of reverb and a little bit of saturation. The reverb probably isn't doing anything, as there's not enough high harmonics in it. So together with everything else, the bass sounds like this. It's kind of like a good middle ground between like driving and funky. Of course, I've got the swing template applied to that as well. Let's have a look at the melodic elements now. So what should we look at first? This disco sample. So as I said, Franky Rizardo tends to sample quite a lot, and that dictates the flavor, if you like, of this kind of aspect of the track. I couldn't use any copyrighted material, so that really kind of dictated what I was able to find for the sample for this. So this is the raw sound without the filter applied, LFO and EQ. So with everything else, that really is like a texture, and then it opens up to kind of reveal itself. So you can hear that really gives it this kind of like warm, housey, groovy vibe. And this bit really is about a vibe. So when you're trying to find this kind of sound, it's just about trying different things until something kind of grabs your ear. So on the downbeat of every 2 bars, I've got this little womp womp kind of sound. So this is quite a cool sound. It's just one note there on the B. And the reason I wanted to use this, because I wanted to show you this cool plugin called Rave Generator. Now in the last few years, this has been heavily used in so many like tech house and minimal house tracks. So it's a free plugin, and what it is a sample player. Someone has gone through and meticulously sampled all of these super famous sounds from old kind of 90s house tracks, techno tracks, rave tracks, hence the name Rave Generator. Type that into Google, Rave Generator, download it. You're going to find so much usable stuff in there. And you're going to probably have a bunch of like aha moments, like because you've thought, where the hell did they get that sound from here? So without the processing on this is just one of the presets called Division by Zero. All of the presets give a hint as to where they're from if they don't outrightly say it. So for example, this one is from Bizarre Inc. It's piano. This one is from Inner City Good Life. Instantly recognizable. Here's one called Hoover, which you'll probably recognize. Back to Division by Zero. So the first thing I'm doing is applying some tremolo. This is just a preset from the frequency shifter in Ableton. So that's just moving the sound a little bit in the panorama, quite subtle. I've got a glue compressor, just controlling the dynamics. I'm adding some delay just to extend the sound out a bit. EQ to cut out the lows. The auto filter is what's giving it a lot of the character. So I've got this LFO engaged and it's going at 8th notes. So that's what gives it this like womp womp kind of sound. And that's got a pretty healthy amount of resonance and drive applied to it, which helps to exaggerate that kind of filtered sound. So without the resonance. Then I've got a bit of chorus from my old favorite Tel Chorus LX, another free plugin. Spreading it out wide, and LFO tool. So that's that one. I've got this chord stab, which is just a sample from a sample pack. And what I'm doing here is I've got a filter, which is set to bandpass, and it's got a bit of resonance. So that's just kind of shaping the sound to be the right tone that I want for the track. The original sound is in F, so I've pitched it down 5 semitones to bring it to C. And then I'm playing it at E, which is compatible with our key of B minor. So let's have a listen to what this filter's doing. So it really thins out the sound. So it doesn't really change the basic tonality of the sound, it just kind of thins it out and allows it to not take up so much space and kind of sit in the track a bit better. Then I've got this FM pluck riff, which is another sample, playing this MIDI pattern on the B, and so it's a really classic FM sounding pluck. And I've EQ'd it quite heavily to take out some of the low mids, as this disco sample is sitting there, the bass is kind of sitting there, so we just don't want it to interfere. It thins out the sound quite a bit, but we really don't need that kind of low mid range. And I'm just pumping up a little bit of the high mids. which helps it to kind of like pop out a wee bit in the mix. That's being sent to a bit of reverb, a bit of delay, and a little bit of saturation. Now finally, I've got this other rave generator which I was originally using instead of the disco sample. I just want to show you that, as it's a different take on how you could use the plugin. So if I turn off the disco sample and the rave generator and play this instead, so different vibe. I felt like it wasn't quite working, so that's why I found the disco sample. And that's a really important lesson, I think. Like, a big part of music production is just trying things and seeing what will work. But it is really important to try. You can sometimes come up with things that end up being the standout thing in your track. And if you didn't try, then maybe that would never have happened. Then we've got a couple of vocals here. Now it's coming from the same loop, which I've just got from a sample pack. Now for this part, I've just got it being sent to a chorus and a ping pong delay, which is just helping it to be a bit more of a texture. And then on this one, I've just used the volume envelope to just play this little bit at the end, and I've quantized it by selecting the clip and pressing Command U, and then I've used this swing setting just to put all the little words in time. So let's have a listen to that. So no idea what that really even says. It's just about the texture and the vibe. And it kind of gives this call and response type of thing with the first bit. So there we go, everything together. So like with most styles, it's really about having a strong identity, some elements which are memorable, and then a lot of kind of supporting elements which work well together to build up a groove with lots of kind of question and answer type things going on. As always, the project files are available for you to download, so you can jump in there and have a look how I've done everything in a bit more detail. There's a link in the description to my Patreon where you can grab that. There you go guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments, what did you think? So I hope you got something from that, and if nothing else, I'm sure that the Rave Generator VST was a bit of an insight into where some of these sounds come from. If you like this tutorial, then you're probably really going to enjoy this one I did on a deeper kind of sound from Archie Hamilton and Tommen kind of style. Anyway guys, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace! Record sales.